From cannibalistic natives to cursed villages, we tell you 10 disturbing stories from mysterious islands. Interested? Come with me. Hey guys, we are from the channel, Another Curiosity, and stay with the 10 disturbing stories from mysterious islands. 10. Tiburon Island. Tiburon Island, Mexico's largest, is a scorching wasteland of treasure, deadly wildlife and lethal cannibals called the Seri. In 1905, Tom Grindell brought a 3-person team to the island to prospect. They expected to be home within a month, but they never came back. Tom's brother, Edward, went to find out what had happened and learned that some Americans had been killed on the island. All that was left of them were their hands, tied to long stakes in the center of the dancing rings. It scared him because the Seri were known to tie their captives to stakes or logs and eat them one piece at a time, savoring the slow death of their victims. Edward Grindell found his brother's dead mule, rifle and some of his books, but determined the hands belonged to someone else. Tom's remains, a pile of bones, were discovered 2 years later. They were identifiable only by nearby handwritten documents. 50 years later, the Seri renounced their cannibalistic ways when the Mexican government threatened to take action if more travelers went missing. When asked about his cannibalism, a member of the Seri said he liked the taste of humans better than most game. 9. Grindell Island. In 1942, the British government wanted to get into this biochemical warfare craze, so they began experimenting with anthrax on a small island off the north coast of Scotland. The small community of Grindell Island had long since vacated, making it the perfect testing ground. Instead of evolving into a new breed of monster, the test sheep they brought in died brutally. The original owner of Grindell Island eventually claimed his land back, but it was deemed uninhabitable by the Ministry of Supply. The area had not been properly quarantined as the government had not even warned mainland residents of what they were doing. Innocent civilians applauded the experiments being conducted 100 meters from shore. It wasn't long before human corpses infected with anthrax began to appear on the Scottish mainland, infecting other animals. The island was cleaned with water and formaldehyde, but it was never habitable and is now a nuclear waste dump. 8. Isola La Cage. Isola La Gaiola is a beautiful Italian island famous for its ancient ruins. Once a symbol of wealth, the island is now deserted because of a series of unfortunate incidents that plagued its former owners. Talk of the island's curse began in the 1920s, when the owner of a newly constructed villa was found dead, his corpse hidden, mafia-style, in a rolled-up rug. His wife, a strong swimmer, apparently drowned in the calm Gulf waters shortly afterwards. The island was then purchased by a wealthy German who died of a mysterious heart attack during his stay. The next owner went mad and took his own life, as did the next owner's son. The successor heir to the Fiat Empire died of an extremely rare form of cancer on the island, while another owner suddenly went bankrupt after a series of unexpected financial setbacks. Finally, J. Paul Getty's grandson was kidnapped shortly after the island was purchased. The island's last owner was arrested on fraud charges and the rundown villa has since been abandoned. 7. The Barbados Chase Vault. Barbados is a jewel in the crown of the Caribbean islands, but it holds a disturbing secret involving the Chase family tomb. In 1808, the body of baby Mary Chase was placed in a metal casket in the family vault. 4 years later, more tragedy arose with the death of Colonel Chase and the suicide of his daughter, Dorcas Chase. When 2 pallbearers carried the colonel's coffin into the crypt, they noticed that baby Mary's coffin had moved and was now standing in a corner. Thinking someone had broken in, they returned it to its rightful place and made sure the tomb was securely locked. When the crypt was reopened, mourners discovered that none of the coffins were in their original places. Stories spread of terrifying noises coming from the crypt, and some of the family's horses mysteriously drowned. The crypt was later reopened to reveal that the coffins had been violently thrown. To solve the mystery, Governor Lord Combermere poured sand on the ground to reveal the culprit's footprints. When the crypt was reopened, the coffins had moved again, but the sand was intact. People have since speculated that floodwater may have risen through the limestone floor, moving the coffins as the water receded. It's an interesting theory, but not as plausible as ghosts. 6. Monks of Solovki Prison. In the 15th and 16th centuries, the monastery and settlements on Solovki were inhabited by peaceful monks. However, During the reign of Ivan the Terrible, the island was slowly converted into a prison colony and a Soviet gulag. People were exiled to the island for treason, petty theft, blasphemy, or for being vagrants and were detained in former monastery buildings. The monks still living on the island were forced to work as prison guards. In 1923, mass military executions began, with over 2,000 killed in 1937 alone. Prisoners describe horrific conditions, such as guards dragging the dead away using hooks as prisoners struggled to keep them for food. Conditions were unbearable, the guarding monks became sadistic, and the work was menial, pointless, and exhausting. It is a far cry from its origins as a peaceful monastery. 5. Sorok Island Leper Colony. Sorok Island, Korea has picturesque beaches and a sinister past. It was a leper colony run by Japanese and Koreans, and the exiles were not patients but inmates who were forced into long days of grueling physical labor. Failing to perform meant a spanking, and if they protested how unfair that was, well, that was another spanking. Some patients were left untreated so that doctors could study the natural progression of the disease. Others were sterilized. The few who were allowed to marry and have children were forced to give up those children when they reached school age, and unapproved pregnancies were forcibly terminated. Residents had to bow before a statue of their superintendent each morning if they wished to eat breakfast. A bridge now connects the island to the mainland, but there is still a stigma attached to the Sorok Islanders. Despite being cured of the disease, many were permanently disfigured by its effects and years of neglect. 4. Palmyra, located in southern Hawaii, sunny Palmyra Atoll is an unlikely destination for a murder mystery. After their marriage, wealthy San Diego couple Malcolm and Eleanor Graham spent 6 years sailing the world on their honeymoon. They were beloved by the boating community and frequently entertained guests. Upon their return, they decided that a 6-year holiday was not enough, so they began another trip to Palmyra. After docking in Palmyra, a couple identifying themselves as Roy and Stephanie Allen arrived in an old dilapidated boat. It turned out that Roy Allen was actually an escaped convict named Buck Dwayne Walker, and Stephanie was his girlfriend. The Grahams were nervous around Walker as he did strange things like shooting fish with his pistol. After a radio call to a close friend, the Grahams were never heard from again. 11 years later, a jury found Walker guilty of killing Eleanor Graham, whose charred body washed up on the Palmyra coast with a gunshot wound, and an acquaintance testified that Walker made Malcolm walk the plank, so it's likely he committed this murder too. The exact sequence of events may never be known, as Walker died of cancer in 2007. 3. Russian settlement of Nazino Island. In 1933, 6,200 people deemed unworthy by the Russian government were exiled to Nazino, a desolate island northeast of Moscow that later became known as Cannibal Island. Most of them were criminals, unemployed or without proper citizenship documents. The relocated received no tools or supplies, and their only food ration was a supply of raw flour that was dumped on shore. Everyone would run over each other to get there. The only water was contaminated, and those who drank it suffered from dysentery. Anyone who tried to flee the island was shot by the guards, even women or children. Originally, Nazino was just a short stop on the way to another settlement. However, the detainees were held in these horrible conditions for over a month. The cannibalism started about 10 days after the nightmare. One survivor recalled seeing a young woman tied to a tree and cut into small pieces by starving prisoners. This twisted arrangement was devised and approved by Stalin and was the culmination of a 3-year initiative to clear Russian streets of so-called undesirables. 2. San Marvello Insane Asylum, located off the Italian coast, San Servolo is an island now known for its dark history museum. The museum is a former hospital founded in the 18th century to treat wounded military troops. However, when the 19th century arrived, it became a moricomio or institution for the insane. The asylum was run by an ancient religious order known as San Giovanni di Dio, which completely isolated its insane patients as a form of treatment. It made the island setting perfect. The order also taught what they called moral treatment, which is now known by its more common name, torture. More worryingly, the institution offered counseling and massage services along with portions of violence and repression. The museum displays authentic restraint devices such as straitjackets, chains, and handcuffs, and you can visit rooms where dangerous electroshock therapy was performed. Better than Disneyland. 1. Jorge Island. George Island is located off the coast of Labrador and was a favorite destination for fishermen and tourists before the tragedy. One day, the schooner Walrus was blown towards the island by a severe storm. Realizing that the ship was heading for the rocks, the captain instructed his men to get into the lifeboats, so that they could safely reach the shore. All but one crew member drowned after the boat capsized. Or at least that's the story the lone survivor told the fishermen who rescued him. But when another group of fishermen landed on the island later that year, they discovered the mutilated, headless bodies of 3 men. Further inland, another body was discovered, this time with multiple axe wounds to the head. They also found 2 tents built from a ship's sail. It appears that the captain and crew of the Walrus managed to land, only to be brutally murdered, Lord of the Flies style, by the sole survivor. Perhaps the crew should have undergone better psychological evaluations. We are producing videos on Wednesday and Friday here on the channel. If you liked it, don't forget to leave your like and activate the notification bell to stay on top of all the news. I'm waiting for you in the next video.